Well, man, I come from a very, very special place in West Virginia. It's called Osage, West Virginia. Now, if you ever visit Osage, you can find this really cool historian, the local town historian. I'm sure Ambridge has some old dude that knows all the history about Ambridge. And if you happen to stumble across this old dude, you'll hear just stories from new perspectives. I heard this one story about my grandfather, and I never heard it in my life because I've always seen him as a very distinguished man. So I'm hanging out with this guy named Al Anderson, who lives right down the street from me, who works at a shoe repair shop. So he repairs shoes and works on soles. He lives next door to a church and where he sings on Sunday and sings gospel music to help save souls. And he's a gospel and soul singer himself, and it's amazing. So it's like the trifecta. So I'm talking to Al Anderson, and he goes, well, man, I know your granddad. And yeah, I'm sure you do. He goes, oh, man, let me tell you about this story about my granddad. And he goes, well, old Cleve Morton. Now, Cleve Morton was the guy who was the suitor of my grandmother before my granddad got to town. He goes, well, old Cleve Morton was down here at the local Bunny Hop down the street. And down the Bunny Hop was the local bar where everybody hung out. You guys following along so far? All right. Okay. So Cleve Morton is hanging out with, he's down at the Bunny Hop talking about my grandmother, whose name is Daisy Jones. Talking about, oh, Daisy Jones, or she was Daisy Jackson at the time. Sorry, let me get all the facts straight. She's talking to Daisy Jackson down the road, and he's talking about how Daisy Jackson is just the sweetest thing, and she loves him and all that good stuff. So my granddad, Robert Jones, here's tell of this. Now, Robert Jones was, if I could describe Robert Jones, it'd be like a thoroughbred of a man. If you ever read the book by George Orwell, Animal Farm, there's a horse called Boxer. And that would be like my granddad, real just like tough dude, loyal and strong, and has like those moral codes that he just sticks by. So Robert Jones walks down there and says, well, you can't be talking about my lady like that, I don't care who you are. And he gets down there and so Al Anderson goes, well, I saw old Cleve Morton and he's standing there looking at your granddad. Your granddad had a fist as wide as a 2x4, and he goes up there and says, Cleve Morton, you better shut your mouth right now. And Cleve Morton, being the kind of guy he was, he goes, well, you know, that Daisy, and before he could get Jackson out of his mouth, he had lifted up off my granddad and hit him in the jaw, lifted him up off the ground, and they was laying down in the middle of the streets, Osage. So I had never, ever heard about this, and I had an opportunity to live with my grandfather about 3 years, or about, I guess 5 years ago now. We lived together for about 3 years, and he, and you know, man, I said, well, granddad was like that, and he goes, well, yeah. So if you ever make your way down to Osage, please stop by, go see Al Anderson and tell him the Appalachian Soul Man sent you. And I would like to play a song about this fun town of Osage that I'm from. It's called Streets of Osage. Down at the end of the road in Osage, there is this little shoe repair shop. And if you can find the time to stop in, Al Anderson will find time to talk. He'll tell you how he fixed all the souls, worn down as time marched along, and how he loves watching the people dance in his shoes while he's on stage singing his songs. 'Cause you can learn the most by listening to those who have made the most of time. And that's just one of those lessons that most of us learn a little too late in life. He told me how the town started from nothing, just a bunch of poor folks who were built tougher than the time. And then the first lady came and took some good folks away, and somewhere trapped under the number 3 mile. Oh, 'cause you can learn the most from the mistakes of those who had their future stolen by time. And that's just one of those lessons that most of us learn a little too late in life. It's the history And on the earth, these are our stories now. They died in them hills and worked in the ground with a living legacy of this forgotten town. So if you're walking down the streets of Osage, you'll hear Al singing at the church next door. He says, I'll fix the souls I can, but I'm just a man. I'll leave the miracles for the Lord. Oh, 'cause you can learn the most by listening to those who have traveled the farthest through time. And that's just one of those lessons that most of us learn a little too late in life. Oh, that's one of those lessons I wish I had learned so much sooner in life. Osage, West Virginia has a very interesting story because in Osage is a town in the community, part of the Scots Run community. And in Scots Run, people came in the 30s, 40s, and 1950s from 17 to 20 different countries over in Europe. And down the sharecroppers that were looking for work down in the South, they all came to West Virginia, believe it or not, for to find work in the coal mine, and there was promise of opportunity for their family. So from about the 1930s to about the 1979 or so, there was a little thriving community that was just at the northern tip of Morgantown, just before you cross over into PA. And that's where the coal mines were. That's where my grandfather met my grandmother and fell in love. That's where they raised my dad. That's where my dad and mom moved when I was first born and a little kid. So for me, this is a very, very special place. And I'll give you a little bit of lore about Osage, West Virginia. What happened was, in the 1930s, during the New Deal, Eleanor Roosevelt was touring around looking at poor communities. And she was looking for ways to get pull people out of poverty. So she gets to Osage and she looks around and she goes, man, this is all y'all got? And she says, I cannot believe that anybody is living this poor. Here's what I want to do, man. You guys are no longer poor coal miners. You guys are farmers. So what she did was she gave a whole new town, one county over, to certain people in Osage. But the problem is whenever she went back to Washington, D.C. to hang out with old Franklin and the gang, she left the job and decided who gets to go to the new town called Arthurdale up to the people there. So they had all kinds of cool tests, like, are your hands too big? Is your forehead too wide? Is your nose too broad? Are you a first-generation immigrant? Can you speak good English? And so certain people got to go, certain people had to stay. Unfortunately, a few years later, there was a tragic coal mine that wiped out whole families, whole generations of family, like grandfather, son, grandson, just obliterated in the Christopher No. 3 mine collapse. And that was pretty devastating for the community, but luckily, the community was able to rebound and continue to rebound. And even now, as development grows all around, and I look up on top of the hill from my house, and I live in Osage now, and I see a Target and a Harley-Davidson shop, and like the interstate's right there and cut right through, and there's Osage still standing there. What do you think, man?
Oh, man, that's great.
That's good.
Yes, indeed. No, man.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
No, man, you got the right thing there, man. Because you know one thing, Osage is building more and more.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
You see?
It'll never die.
That's right.